To anyone who's seeking entrepreneurship at whatever phase they are,
Sure.
stop and make a plan. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned working in corporate America is nothing happens that's not measured and metered, right? Everything, especially when you work for institutions that are, everything's financially driven, right? And everything is, whether it's a product launch or even in the nonprofit world, if you're working for a campaign launch, there needs to be strategy behind it. And there needs to be, and it's great. Just start, right? Like if you want to be an entrepreneur, just go for it.
Hello, welcome to Career Curious. I'm your host, George Roots. Today I'm joined with Kelly Morris. Hi, Kelly, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, George, glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me to chit chat all things career. It's one of my favorite topics as a reformed career counselor. Any conversation I have with most people comes back to, well, is your career aligning with who you want to be and where you want to go? And how do we combine your talents? And I'm pretty insufferable. So this was the topic near and dear to my heart. I'm Kelly Morris. I am a recovering institutional and corporation-centric employee. I've worked in marketing in some form or fashion for nearly, started my career to almost coming up on 15 years. I've spanned the tri-sectors. I've started my career in property management, knew very quickly that was not for me, moved into the nonprofit sector and have stayed in that sector on and off for 15 years, working at local and national levels. Then worked in higher ed, both as a career coach and as a communications lead for a division, and then as also a public speaker instructor. And then from there, bounced back over into corporate America. And, just kind of, I tend to professionally go where opportunity is and where my interests are. That's what's allowed me to span the tri-sectors, nonprofit, public, and private.
What are you doing today? What keeps you busy?
So outside of being a wife, mother, we have two small boys. They are 3.5 and almost 17 months. I have recently transitioned from overseeing the marketing department for a biotech firm. I've always had a love for outbound communications. For me, it's about storytelling and having connections with people. And that's why I love marketing. Some things have shifted for me as they do for a lot of parents when they transition into this chapter of life. You start questioning values and how you're spending your time. And so for me, following a layoff and a downsize for my previous employer, I've taken this opportunity to shift into more of an entrepreneurial role. I come from a long line of entrepreneurs. My great-grandparents, my grandparents, my parents, my husband are all entrepreneurs. And I have a deep, deep love of food systems. My mom's people are farmers and my father's people are essentially restaurateurs. And then I married a man who owns 2 hydroponic and organic gardening supply stores. And so food is always kind of been, obviously it's at the epicenter of our lives as humans. We have to have nutrients and intake. But for me, it's always been a way to foster connection and community. Having worked in the nonprofit space for so many years and having had a specific interest in food systems and community gardens and how we bring people together, I'm transitioning. I keep using the term foodapreneur. I'm trying to coin it. I don't know if it's going to take off or not, but I'm transitioning into a food-centric career, focusing on lifestyle. So we're going to talk about how in this busy time as parenting small children, how do we transition away from foods of convenience, which we all need to eat and we all have to eat. And sometimes you have no choice but to grab, we were at Trader Joe's last week. We grabbed the heat and serve Indian foods. But how do you, as a busy mother, as a working mother, as an entrepreneur, help other women and other families eat locally sourced, eat and grow as much of their own food as possible? And so that's where I am professionally right now.
That's amazing. I think it's so wonderful because one of the audience would be someone who hasn't joined the workforce yet, but another part of the audience is people who maybe think about making transitions.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's an opportunity to dive deep into your previous life.
Yeah.
What was that day-to-day like, but also your current life and what allowed you to be comfortable making that transition. What gave you the confidence to jump out and be an entrepreneur? There's a burden that comes with that.
My husband, who's been an entrepreneur, was a boat captain by trade. he would be someone interesting for you to talk to because he's transitioned as well. He recognized that he didn't have as much creative control and freedom and was, if you're a boat captain and you're doing, high-end yachts, you're traveling for a large part of the year. Fell in love with the low country. And so he's been an entrepreneur now for, 16 years is when he started the business here in Savannah. And I just have watched other people around me. Having said, watched my friends, watched my family. I'm one of the few people in our network that was employed through an institution, well, whatever that may be, public, private, nonprofit, doesn't matter. And so I was having some grass is greener envy. I'm watching all of my friends have not only success in their chosen industry, whether it be monetary, whether it meant time, freedom, financial, otherwise, creativity. I was watching them have success and I had envy. And you have to address the envy. You have to address the jealousy. And so part of it was just wanting to make the leap. I had attempted entrepreneurship once before. I worked for a large university, running communications for one of their divisions, and was like, this is soul sucking. I'm not able to push out communications in a way that makes sense to me. I don't have my arms around the content. It was just too big. And so I said, I need to take a step back. And so I left that job. Everyone thought I was nuts, right? They're like, what? You have a great job with a great university and there's the perks and the benefits and yada, yada, yada. And my soul is dead and I'm not happy and I feel disconnected from the work as I've transitioned from corporate America, high pressure, fast paced. As a parent, it didn't work for me as a wife. It didn't work for me as a mother. It didn't work for me as a human to continue to function in that environment because it didn't coincide with who I am and who I want to be. Part of it was living below our means, right? You have to live below your means to get to the next.
I'd love to dig deeper into that. I don't know if that's a podcast episode, Kelly Moore's part B, because it seems like there's a lot of work there to be able to say, like, what kind of guardrails could you put in? What kind of system could someone else, if they wanted to mimic your journey?
Projections.
Absolutely.
Part of what's allowed me to make the leap as a professional is I have my partner's support. My husband is, babe, I want you to be happy. Don't get it wrong. There was trepidation. This decision for me to make this leap into entrepreneurship, whereas I was flirting with it and dancing with it, I had not jumped yet. And the decision was made for me by a corporate layoff, eliminating my division. And honestly, as heartbreaking as it was, because I'm an opportunist and I like to earn and I produce and I contribute to organizations, it was a gift. It gave me the push that I needed to jump. But I also, while I was still working, some of these businesses, both my husband's current business, the nonprofit we've started related to food education, my food truck, and the commercial kitchen, I've been working on in my spare time on the weekends. And then part of that is my brother is a financial analyst, an advisor. He works in corporate America. He'd be someone great for you to talk to as well. But anyway, my brother helped do some financial modeling. So we know if we meet X, Y, and Z target, this will be the outcome.
I will say, just to hopefully give you words of support, I think that entrepreneurship is a calling where you're compelled in that direction. A person could have their division eliminated and then choose to look for other positions to get that safety net versus deciding to make the jump. I would like to frame it as you've empowered yourself to take that journey versus it happened to you.
No, and that's a thread of life. I mean, things happen to us, but we have a choice. And let's not get it twisted, George. There have been moments of panic where I pulled out the laptop and hopped on LinkedIn and was like, all right, I'm just going to go get another job. But my husband's like, slow down. You're okay. Slow down. And so what I've given myself is a year. I've given myself 2025.
How far along are you inside the journey?
I'm doing some consulting and kind of dabbling. But so my position, I mean, literally it just happened. Like in the winter, my position was eliminated and we've kind of navigated through the exit of that opportunity for me. But it's just starting.
So what are the biggest challenges you're seeing so far from changing directions?
So, and this is something that I've struggled with as a parent. For me, it's the focus time. And so we have 2 young children. Even when we had full-time help, we had a nanny who came and helped us during the week and a sitter who helped in the evenings. It was because my priorities have shifted. I'm a type A++ person. My calendar is color coded. I am scheduled. I am regimented as a professional in my past life. The biggest obstacle has been just leaning into it and grabbing time, as opposed to every Thursday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., I work on grants. No, I don't have that luxury anymore. We lost my income streams. I'm not working full time. We don't have full-time help with the kids. It's been juggling all the things now with limited support. And my husband being an entrepreneur as well, his schedule's in flux. When you have people who are constantly in flux and then the children's sleep patterns change or their eating habits change or whatever, it's constant change. That's been something that I've been struggling to wrap my arms around. I've given myself the month of December to rest and relax, which I quite frankly think as humans we should be doing anyway. We're not designed to live the way we live. We're not designed to work the way we work. The system is broken, which is part of the reason why corporate burnout and institutional burnout happens so frequently, is because we're not designed to live this way. And so we should be resting. I've given myself the month of December to recalibrate, to pick up projects if I want to, and then to starting after the first of the year to hit it in a different way and to start getting more regimented and go back into that time blocking where my husband will have the children Tuesday, Thursdays, every other Friday from morning until after lunch, but to really, really be regimented in that schedule. That's the biggest challenge we're having right now, is finding the time to carve out when, caring for children is a full-time job.
What advice would you give another person if tomorrow you found out that they are faced with the same situation and have similar aspirations? A new entrepreneur. I know that this is early in the journey, but you've been a part of other people's journey as well. You've had the energy for a while. Like, what advice would you give to someone?
To anyone who's seeking entrepreneurship at whatever phase they are,
Sure.
stop and make a plan. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned working in corporate America is nothing happens that's not measured and metered, right? Everything, especially when you work for institutions that are, everything's financially driven, right? And everything is, whether it's a product launch or even in the nonprofit world, if you're working for a campaign launch, there needs to be strategy behind it. And there needs to be, and it's great, just start, right? Like if you want to be an entrepreneur, just go for it. Carve out the time. Typically this year, Q4 is my planning phase and my recalibration phase. To go into Q4 with a plan, or depending on where you are in the journey, carve out a month or as much time as you can to make a plan, build your strategy and map it. And ChatGPT is a wonderful tool because you can train your bot. I just named mine last night, which was fun. Her name is Maze, to build the strategy behind what you want to do, to map it out, because those guardrails and those safety net of this is what my plan is will help when people who might not understand what you're doing, whether they're friends or foes, start critiquing you, right? I'm dealing with it a little bit. People are, you're doing this, there's a little noise, right? I know what my plan is. I've got it mapped. Or the map changes, we adjust, we pivot as we need to. But I've got a plan and it's mapped, and we're going to give it a year. We're going to give it 12 months. And if at the end of 12 months, we're not having the success that we want and it doesn't look like what we want, we'll pivot again. Map at least 12 months of your life and do it in 3-month chunks. I like to work off 90-day plans, those 30, 60, 90 action day plans. This is what I'm doing, because otherwise you just feel like you're spinning out.
What is a win or a success that you've had early on?
So goodness, I guess related to building the food system and the food hub, as we're calling it here in Savannah, that we're working towards, because it's part retail, it's part nonprofit, it's part food service, right? Like we're trying to build a regional food hub where people can get connected to their food. And we have the farmers markets and we have so many great places for people to connect. I guess for me, the biggest win that I've had recently, and I've got some work to do on it, was, George, I did what you did. We knew we wanted to start a nonprofit. And it was March of 23. I was pregnant with our son, Cooper, and I just ripped the Band-Aid. Let's just go. I filed for the 501c3 designation. We had a name and some stuff in place, but I just went for it. Fast forward a year, we started fundraising. Just small scale, telling our friends and family what we're doing. We had another avenue and fundraising opportunity present itself. We've raised around $5,000 to date. We went for it. And on the days when my husband's like, we've got to get this in place, I said, there's time to get that in place. But we just did it. And that to me was a win because we had been talking about it. I journaled and I had a notebook that when my husband and I met, we met in December of 17, and we were talking about where we'd been professionally and where we wanted to go in the future. And when you meet someone and you're talking about building a life with them, and it would have been it had to have been maybe January, February. So it would have been late winter going into early spring of 2018. One night we were sitting in my living room, my little apartment, and I wrote down all the dreams, all the things we wanted to do, the nonprofit, the food space, the food truck, the farm, and how we wanted to scale it and shift it. I wrote it all down. And then we've started slowly achieving those things. And
Absolutely.
It's been so gratifying. It's actually sitting right over there on my desk. And it's been so cool to pull it out and to look back at it and to look back at that roadmap that we put into place. And then on the days when it gets squirrely and the kids are off the chain, and when I was working in other organizations, the stress from other outside people was soul crushing, we could come back to it. And we could be like, nope, we've made some progress. Biggest win was going for it.
Absolutely. I think that sounds amazing. In fact, I relate to it completely. Well, one of the last questions I have would be, What does, like in 6 months or a year from now, what does success look like for you? I'm sure we'll have you back on the podcast to
Yeah, I'd love to.
share your journey. I think it's beautiful and amazing so far.
Thank
And I
you.
love reflection, but we could project out like what's next for you?
In 6 months' time, I would like to have our food truck live. We had a setback with a vendor. We had a vendor not follow through. And so that set us back. Gosh, we're almost 6 months into that setback, and we're still trying to work through it. It's okay. We'll get there. In 6 months' time, I would like to have the food truck live and functioning and serving and providing food for folks. Part of this journey is bringing joy to others. And so how do we do that? I'm a huge fan of flowers, beauty, and we're working on a cut flower farm. In about 6 months, it'll be coming through its first season. And I'd like to have those two projects off the ground. And then to have rested some and traveled outside of professionally, I would like to have enjoyed life in a different way, in a way that's not so frenzied, that's not so chaotic, and in a way that I have a tiny bit more control of. Not that we ever have control of anything in this world, but just to know that I've mapped a plan, and my husband and partner, that we've executed on that plan together. And those two particular projects are what we're starting with and working on most recently.
That sounds amazing. I love the flexibility that entrepreneurship does allow a person to have if they're willing to put those guardrails in place. Otherwise, it can be overwhelming and ever consuming.
Thank you. And what's fun too about it, and as we're wrapping up here, I've noticed this is something that I did not do as a professional. I changed majors 7 times in undergrad. I worked for 10 years before I went back and got my master's in communications. But what I will recommend to anyone, no matter where you are in your career trajectory, whether you're a student and you're just starting out and you're trying to pick a major, or if you are a recent college graduate and you're looking for jobs, or you're like myself, who's been working for 15 years in some form or fashion for various organizations, find the gap in the job market and how your skill set can match it. And if you're an entrepreneur, find the need. We can pivot, but find the gap and what fills your cup. Find what makes your heart sing. I know that's a little cheesy, but truly find what brings you joy and find a way to monetize it, because we all have to work. We all have to produce, but we should be working and producing something that doesn't suck our soul and will make us cry ourselves to sleep at night.
Thank you so much for that. Do you have any questions for me?
No, I guess I'm excited. I'm happy to be a part of the conversation. I love personal and professional development. And I think it's really cool that you're doing this. And I think it's really cool that you just went for it. And that's what you're doing. This is a nice time too. And just as you're plotting your next move and plotting, what do I do with this podcast? What do I do with this content? Build your repository. You're already doing that on YouTube, and then start putting it on TikTok. Go ahead and push out those shorts that you have. I take a look, push them out on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. Do it. And it won't take you long. You've got the content already. That's the hard part. There's so much need for authentic and real professional development. There's a shift happening, not just in our food systems, but in the workforce. We are literally revolting, especially women.
Thank you again, Kelly, for joining me for the podcast. Thank you for sharing your insights with our audience. Hopefully, we'll talk again in the next 6 months.
Yeah, absolutely, George. Thank you for having me. Thank you for doing this work. I think it's incredibly valuable, and people's stories need to be told. And as we help the next generation or each other navigate life, I think it's incredible to have those real world, this is what I've experienced perspective and stories. So kudos to you for doing the work.